Zuko soared over snow-topped mountains and green valleys. A predatory instinct focused his attention to any sudden movements near him, but he mostly saw animals, not people. The sun would rise soon. Zuko should probably hide somewhere for the day, but first he needed to get rid of the worrying, limp body of the earthbender he was carrying in his paws. Zuko didn't know Illa, but what little he learned from Sokka and Irie's conversation, the girl had been with the Earth Kingdom militia. But she had also betrayed them for the sake of doing what she thought was right. Weird and treasonous, yet oddly honorable at the same time. If one of my crew helped an enemy like the Avatar escape from me, I'd be furious, but Illa's just a kid. Kids do stupid things, so what if she screwed up? She shouldn't have to pay for it for the rest of her life. One way or another, Zuko wouldn't let her die in his arms. As Zuko scaled one last hilltop, the monastery came into view. Zuko could tell there were 2 guards at their usual lookout posts on the monastery wall. They would have been invisible to anyone looking up from ground level, but from the bird-eye perspective Zuko had no trouble spotting them. Following a cold wind current down the mountainside, Zuko rushed forward. He was moving so close to the rocky cliffs that he had to serpent around a few tall trees to avoid hitting them. Soon, Zuko was close enough to catch the guard's scent. He slowed his descent and stopped just above the monastery. 3 paws clinging to the mountainside. They wouldn't spot him from here. The cliff was too steep for a human to climb, so they didn't guard this direction. Zuko knew this, because he had been crazy enough to enter the monastery from this direction the first time he infiltrated the place. Surveying the courtyard and the wall one last time, making sure there wasn't an ambush waiting for him, he opened his wings and let the wind float him down the rest of the way. The guards were still oblivious to his presence, each huddled in their own hiding place on opposite sides of the small gatehouse. In one last leap, Zuko closed the distance between him and the guards closest to him, landing only a few meters behind the man, letting out a warm breath to make his presence known. Immediately, the guard's pose straightened and every hair on the back stood up. He swirled around, a look of shock forming on his face when he realized what he was facing. Now that Zuko was close enough to see the guard's face, he was sure it was no one he knew. The man was young, probably only a few years older than Zuko. He was probably a new apprentice. The man opened his mouth to call for help, or quite possibly scream, but before he could make a sound, Zuko's whisker was on the man's forehead. "Be calm, not an attack," Zuko attempted to communicate to the frightened man. "A friend, need help, get Master Kurta, now." The man was in awe, but still too afraid to move, so Zuko decided to nudge him with a friendly memory. For a brief moment, he showed the man an image of a sun-warmed pond in the middle of a still clearing. It was a place Uncle had taken him to meditate in once. It was the calmest thing he could think of at the moment that wouldn't be recognizable to give away his identity. The random image seemed to snap the man out of his terror. "This is impossible! Master Kurta, now," Zuko commanded. "Hey!" The other guard yelled from a low distance away, having noticed Zuko's silhouette against the gray morning sky. He whistled a high-pitched warning. This was to be expected, but still made Zuko anxious. He broke the connection to the young guard. It wasn't this apprentice that Zuko needed to convince to take Illa in. A group of Order members emerged from different entryways, ready to defend their little hideout. Come what may, most of them halted in place when they saw what they were up against. It's okay," the guard Zuko had communicated with managed. "He's a friend." Zuko didn't let go of Illa yet, in case he had to make a quick escape. He peered at the crowd forming on the yard, looking for people he knew. Feeling surrounded and outnumbered, Zuko had to resist the urge to open his wings and growl at them to look bigger and badder. It would send the wrong message. Finally, Zuko saw Master Kurta enter the small courtyard. The guard standing next to Zuko noticed it too. "Master Kurta! This dragon wants to have a word with you." Zuko weighed his options. He could fly over to where Kurta was standing, but that would mean he'd have to go down into the courtyard. On the other hand, he didn't have the patience to wait for the master to get up here. He spread his wings and made eye contact with Kurta to see if his gesture had been seen and understood. To Zuko's relief, Kurta nodded to him and then commanded his men to make space for their guests to land. Some of the Order people looked like they disagreed, but they did as they were told. Zuko landed in front of Kurta. Not wasting any time, he formed a connection between their minds. It was easier than he had anticipated, but Zuko still felt nervous. He didn't wish to reveal anything of who he really was, so he focused on his mind to dominate the conversation. Showing Kurta a short story piled together from his own, Sokka, and Ari's memories, he showed how Illa had saved a Yuyan and gotten injured fighting her own people, whom she had betrayed. Zuko lowered the earthbender down before Kurta and finished his story with the intent of saying, "Help, please." Breaking the connection as soon as he was done explaining himself and taking a step back, Kurta looked surprised. He wasn't used to getting dismissed like that. The man bowed his head in respect and said, "I am Master Kurta, and this is the Order Shadows. You are welcome here, unnamed dragon, and so is this girl you have pleaded sanctuary for." Kurta looked older and more fragile than Zuko had remembered, but his eyes were still sharp. Zuko had no reason to doubt his words. Not sure what else to do, Zuko lowered his head, forming something he hoped looked like a dragon version of a bow. He let go of the girl, gently placing her on the ground between himself and the master. Then, without a warning, Zuko opened his wings and took to the sky. On his way to the monastery, Zuko had considered staying there himself, at least for a day. Now that he was here, Zuko knew in his heart there wasn't the place for him. These people have chosen to dedicate their lives to passing on ancient knowledge. I can respect them for it, but it's not for me. I'm not sure what kind of life I will lead, but a life of inaction isn't it. Not even close. Now that there weren't any immediate threats or groundbreaking revelations to keep his mind occupied, Zuko realized he was tired. He hadn't rested since... Zuko had been too afraid to stop and rest, too afraid to be left alone with his thoughts. But the reality of his situation was that Zuko had no idea where to go next. Not knowing was the worst. So long as he had a plan, even a desperate plan like finding and capturing the Avatar, Zuko could find the strength within him to keep going. But now, he didn't have a plan. Not even a short-term one. Not even a bad plan, and Zuko felt desperate. What should I do now? He felt numb and tired. It was easier to breathe now. His mind felt clearer. Cold, but clear. Ozai had thought about killing Zuko, but Zuko was certain his father wouldn't have gone through with it. Not unless Zuko had deserved it, and if that had been the case, it would have been Zuko's fault. Ozai had banished Ursa. Their family had been shattered because of Zuko. Ursa had murdered grandfather. Zuko's mother had killed the Fire Lord to protect him. How could Uncle ever forgive him for that? For all this time, Iroh had been there for Zuko, but Iroh hadn't known the truth. What would Uncle do when he found out? Iroh would probably be really worried, but Zuko wasn't sure if he had it in him to face his uncle just yet. Zuko couldn't handle another rejection. I've been holding Uncle back for years. Iroh deserves better. I would mourn the loss of Zuko, but he'd get over it, and he'd be better off without him. Zuko saw a rocky outcrop in the forest below him, landed there and curled on himself. I could still capture the Avatar. If Zuko regained his honor, he could return to the Fire Nation and to Uncle, his honor restored, and become the prince he was born to be. Zuko wasn't sure if he should capture the Avatar anymore, or even if he ever should have. The Airbender was nothing like the scary and bitter man Zuko had expected to find. He wasn't harmless, but he was just a kid. Looking back on it, Zuko had had his doubts about his mission from some time now. Possibly ever since he had saw the Avatar through Katara's eyes. Maybe that was why he'd allowed himself to get distracted from his quest in the first place. Zuko shook his head drowsily. It was ridiculous to think this way, to think that he knew better than the Fire Lord before him. The Avatar was and would remain a real threat to the nation. It was Zuko's duty to his people to eliminate such threats. There was no way around it. And still. Thankfully, Zuko was so tired he dozed off despite the rising sun that would usually keep him awake. "I'm so bored," Toph said to no one in particular. Not like she had anyone to talk to. She kicked a boulder, causing him to fly across the cave and land with a satisfying thump. Toph knew she shouldn't complain. She had been able to escape her gilded cage for a day, and that always seemed to be grateful for. It had lately become harder to come up with new ways to ditch her useless earthbending teacher, and get the opportunity to run off to study some actual earthbending. The Earth Rumble was only a month away, and she should make the most of this opportunity and practice hard. Toph kicked another rock, this time breaking it in half. It all felt so pointless. Toph knew she was the greatest earthbender in the world. She really was, certifiably. She had her 6 Earth Rumble championships to prove it. She knew she was good, but what was the point when no one else knew it? Why couldn't her parents see? Why can't they see me? For a moment, Toph felt like crying, but that made her angry, which was better. Sadness was useless, not to mention pathetic. She was not one of those girly girls who cried. Toph kicked another unsuspected boulder, crushing it to dust. She crossed her arms defiantly, not that anyone would see her gesture. No one came to these caves except her and the badger moles, and they were all blind. Toph kept walking, not heading anywhere in particular. She had excavated these caves in depth in her childhood, so she knew she wouldn't get lost. This was where she had met the badger moles for the first time, and where her life of seeing had truly begun. But as Toph had grown older, her parents had begun keeping tighter watch over her, and she couldn't remember when was the last time she wandered this deep into the caves. I must be miles away from a go-along by now, she thought to herself. Good. Maybe I'll just keep walking and not go back. Toph knew she wouldn't do that. She couldn't. They were her parents, no matter how dorky they were. Toph stopped. She could see something. First she thought that was a badger mole, but stopped to rest in the cave above her. But focusing on the weight, Toph could tell it was no badger mole. It was something big, warm, and breathing. A kimono rhino? No, the shape's all wrong. Toph focused harder, trying to build a mental image of the creature, but it kept eluding her. What had begun as mild curiosity was now turning into annoyance. It was like this thing was purposely toying with her, mocking her blindness. The creature wasn't in one of the caves, but all the way on the surface. Going up there would be a bad idea. Toph was more than able to take care of herself, but what if someone saw her? For a moment, Toph felt torn. She had already taken a few steps toward home when it hit her that running away from a possible fight was cowardice. And she was not a coward. So, instead, Toph started to dig a tunnel toward the creature's resting place. Zuko had never been a deep sleeper, a fact that did not change when he turned into a dragon, it seemed. He wasn't sure how long he'd been asleep, but looking at the sun high above him, he guessed it was around midday. A quiet sound had woken him, but Zuko couldn't determine where it was coming from. He stayed still, not wanting to let his attacker know he was onto them. There, something brushed against the grass. Zuko got to his feet, flashing his teeth, and growled. To his surprise, the source of the sound was a tiny Earth Kingdom girl. The girl yelped. Zuko didn't know how to react. Waving her arms, the ground under Zuko's feet erupted, tying him in place. Hating feeling so vulnerable, Zuko opened his mouth and huffed waves of fire at his feet, causing the clay-like earth to dry up, weaken, and explode off his paws. Some of the shrapnel hit Zuko on his softer underside rather painfully, but at least he was free again. Zuko turned toward the girl. She had raised a wall of earth to protect herself from the flying debris. Before Zuko could get off the ground, the girl attacked him again, this time with an ostrich horse-sized boulder that she assembled out of nowhere. Zuko hissed in pain as the rock hit his left shoulder and lower neck with crushing precision. Blinded by anger, Zuko shook the pain off and rose to the sky. He circled the girl to get past her wall, keeping his distance from the element that would bring him pain. Vaguely realizing he had the option of just flying away, but it wasn't in his nature to turn down a fight. For a moment the girl looked frozen in place. Then she lifted her hands to cover her head, the gesture causing the earth to create a shield-like structure above her. Zuko swooped down and lashed his tail at the rocks. The veracity of the movement shattered the haphazardly put-together shield. Before the girl had time to make another, Zuko landed on top of her, grabbing her in his paws, and shot back to the sky. Zuko flew higher, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He noticed that his captive wasn't even attempting to struggle loose. On the contrary, she was holding onto Zuko's paw for dear life. For the first time, he got a good look at the girl, and noticed there was something odd about her eyes. They were milky and white. She's blind? Zuko realized. I just abused and kidnapped a blind girl. Suddenly feeling horrible about his actions, Zuko struggled to think of a way to make things right. Unable to think of a better solution, he created a mental link to the girl. Hush, cub, don't cry. I won't hurt you. I won't let you fall. The girl's unseen eyes widened in surprise. You can speak? Yes, don't cry. Everything will be alright, Zuko assured her. I'm not crying. The girl, Toph, sniffed. Just get me back down, will you? Zuko mentally agreed, suddenly understanding the extent of the girl's discomfort. He had forced her to the air where she couldn't see anything. Zuko landed back in the same outcrop that they left from. Are you injured? Zuko asked. He tried to find the answer from Toph's mind, but it was hard to read. Her memories were very different from other people's memories, which usually consisted of images. Back on the ground, Toph's heartbeat began to even out. Her element was a source of power and comfort to her. Zuko had never experienced anything like it. Toph, too, was blown away. When you show me these things, these images, I can see them. You know, like regular people do, I think. Do it again, Toph said. She didn't look hurt, so Zuko decided to amuse her. He showed Toph the clearing they were currently in, causing her to gasp in awe. So that's what colors look like. But there's no weight or depth in it. How do people move with all these confusing blur that is the only source of information? The girl appeared to be talking to no one in particular, so Zuko saw no need to answer her question. Zuko couldn't help but feel a bit sorry for Toph, who was amazed by such simple things as color and sunlight. How awful it would be to be deprived of the ability to see. A gift most take for granted, Zuko thought to himself, careful not to share the notion with the girl. After the Agni Kai, the healers had told him there was a chance he would lose sight in his left eye. Zuko hadn't, but nor had he made a full recovery. The vision in his left eye had always been a bit blurry ever since. It was a weakness Zuko was ashamed of, but had learned to compensate for. This is amazing! Toph giggled and changed the topic seamlessly. I didn't know dragons can talk. In fact, I didn't know there were still dragons. I didn't know it was possible to see with your feet, Zuko shot back, irritated that he revealed national secrets to a perfect stranger again. You're inside my head? Thoughtful, but not afraid like any sane person would have been. Most people find it offensive, Zuko admitted. You're not offended? You kidding me? Toph replied. This is way cooler than talking to badger moles. Zuko blinked. Maybe he misheard that. Oh man, I hit you with a rock! Toph suddenly remembered. Are you alright? Zuko tried to move his left shoulder and had to grimace. He peered at his long, elastic neck to look at the damage. The boulder had hit him with enough force to scratch his scaly skin. No small achievement, taking into consideration that dragon skin was built to weather stormy winds and the heat of volcanic ash. I'll live. Toph nodded and smiled at him. You should have been more careful when you attack me next time, Flicker. Flicker? You attacked first, Zuko pointed out. I tied you down. If I had been attacking you, you'd be out for the count. Big talk. Hey, I could have taken you down if you hadn't cheated, the girl exclaimed. Zuko was very. Toph looked upset, maybe even angry, but then she smiled at him playfully. You're difficult to read, Zuko admitted. It was odd how easy it was for him to talk to the stranger. Years of practice, I have a killer poker face, Toph admitted, and Zuko was relatively sure she meant it. It's not easy being a master earthbender, but it's a lot harder when you have to let people think you're a pathetic blind girl instead. Zuko was confused, so Toph explained that her parents didn't expect much out of her. Nothing but a quiet obedience. They wanted her to be only what they thought she should be. A madly skilled earthbender wasn't what they ordered. Toph's life reminded Zuko of another girl he used to know. May had always had hidden skills and interests that her parents didn't entirely approve of, and a good poker face to go with them. Better than Zuko's for sure. Toph was still quiet, so Zuko decided to say something. I think I understand. I let my family down. I was never as good as what was expected of me. Ouch. Toph considered for a while. Is that why you're alone? Yes. You ran away from home? I was banished. Seriously? Well, their loss. Zuko blinked twice, but the girl's words still made no sense. You know, Toph went on, with you being such a nice dragon and all, it's their loss they didn't see how awesome you are. Zuko was still baffled. But we have to respect our parents. They are right. Toph snorted. Zuko tried to explain. My father is powerful and wise, and he has his reasons. If his father was so great, why did he want his own son dead? Zuko wouldn't let himself think that way. He wouldn't have killed me. He couldn't have. Killed you? Who tried to kill you? No one. Zuko wasn't a good liar. He would have to be more careful and not let inner monologues turn to inner dialogues. I should go. Fine, I should head home pretty soon anyway, before anyone starts wondering where I am. Toph sounded nonchalant, but there was a bitter edge to her voice. Zuko broke the connection. She was going to return to her life based on the lie, and Zuko couldn't blame her. And Zuko had to pretend to be something he wasn't so that Ozai would finally be proud of him. He might just do it. There was a time when Zuko wouldn't have thought it unnecessary. The old Zuko wanted to believe that after he returned home, he and Ozai would have an open and honest relationship. However, he could no longer picture any of that. Irrational as it may be, Zuko wished he had stayed with Uncle, the only real family I have left. Toph began walking away, but she stopped after a few steps. Biting her lip, she turned to Zuko. Where are you gonna go? Zuko shrugged with his good shoulder. It was a conveniently non-verbal gesture, and also true. He had no idea where he was going. It occurred to Zuko that shrugging was probably a pretty useless way to reply to a blind girl, but before he had time to think of a different one, Toph went on. I was asking because, if you're going to be in the neighborhood for a while, it'll be nice to hang out sometime. Zuko was stunned. She wants to hang out with me? Toph sounded sincere enough. I sometimes hang out with badger moles, but as good listeners as they are, they're pretty lousy when it comes to making conversation. Toph went on, discussing large, earth-bending animals like some people talk about the weather. If you have to go, then I get it, and it's fine, but I thought you should know that if you're staying, you have nothing to fear from me. I won't tell anyone I met you. They wouldn't even know I was here. She really wants me to stay? This earth-bending midget who thinks I'm awesome? She also thinks I'm a dragon and has no clue about my true identity, but still. For years, Zuko had been so focused on his mission, they had rarely taken true interest in other people's lives, and never stayed long enough in one place to make friends. He felt torn. It felt good to be wanted, but trust wasn't one of his strong suits. He made a brief connection to the girl. Just one question he had to ask. Why? Toph smiled absently, looking more insecure than during their entire encounter so far. Sound like you could use a friend. And to be perfectly honest, so could I.